In 1992, a farmer named Wu Anai stood at the edge of a pond behind his village and made a decision that would rewrite Chinese history. He wasn't looking for anything. He just wanted the water gone. The pond was useless for farming, and he was tired of it taking up space. So he brought in pumps and started draining it. For days, nothing happened. Just water dropping foot by foot, hour by hour. Wu almost called it off more than once. Then, on the last day, as the final few feet of water sank away, he saw something that made him stop breathing. Not mud, not rock. Walls. Perfectly smooth, perfectly angled walls, carved into a chamber the size of a football field. And beneath that chamber, another one, and another. Wu later said he stood frozen at the edge, unable to make sense of what his own pond had been hiding his entire life. He'd fished in that water as a boy. He had no idea he'd been swimming above a buried city. By the time the pumps finished their work, the villagers weren't looking at a pond anymore. They were staring down into the mouth of an underground city, one that could swallow a 20-story building whole. No government record, no ancient text, no legend passed down through 1,000 years of local memory so much as hinted that this place existed. Somebody built this. Somebody moved over 1 million cubic meters of solid rock by hand with nothing but simple tools. And then somebody made sure the entire world forgot. The question that has haunted archaeologists ever since isn't just who built the Longyou Caves. It's what were they hiding down there? And why did they want it to disappear? Stay with me, because the deeper researchers dig into this mystery, the stranger and more unsettling the answers become. The village is called Xi'an Beichun in Zhejiang Province, southeastern China. For as long as anyone could remember, the ponds scattered around the village were simply that, ponds. Deep, dark, and, according to local superstition, bottomless. Children were warned to stay away from them. Fishermen avoided casting nets too far into the center. Grandmothers told their grandchildren the water was bottomless, that something down there had no end. Nobody thought to ask why a bottomless pond existed in the middle of a rural farming village with no natural lake system to explain it. The warning had simply always been there, passed down like a family name.
It is real.
When the water drained, Wu and his neighbors found themselves looking down at a staircase-like descent into an artificial cavern nearly 100 feet below the surface. Word reached the provincial archaeology office within days. Among the first researchers to climb down into the dark was a young archaeologist who would go on to spend the next 3 decades of her career trying to answer one question. She later described that first descent as walking into a silence so complete it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. What she and her colleagues found didn't just raise questions, it broke the assumptions they'd walked in with. There wasn't just one cave, there were 24 of them, discovered scattered beneath the village, hollowed directly out of solid siltstone bedrock. Some soared over 100 feet high. Others stretched wide enough to hold multiple basketball courts side by side. The largest single chamber contained enough excavated volume to make it one of the biggest man-made underground spaces ever found anywhere on Earth. And every single wall bore the same signature: parallel chisel marks, evenly spaced, cut at a consistent angle, running from floor to ceiling like the teeth of a giant comb. Here's where the mystery deepens, and where it stopped being just an archaeological curiosity and started keeping researchers up at night. Historians estimate that carving out all 24 caverns would have required moving roughly 1 million cubic meters of solid rock. To put that into perspective, that is enough material to fill more than 400 Olympic swimming pools. Now, stop and think about what that actually means. Every single one of those million cubic meters was removed by hand, one chisel strike at a time, by people who left behind almost no trace of who they were.
A project of that scale in almost any ancient civilization would have left a trail. Tax records for the laborers, imperial edicts commissioning the work, religious texts describing the purpose of the site. Local legends passed from grandmother to grandchild for centuries. The Longyou Caves left none of that. The archaeologist who first climbed down into the dark put it simply. In 30 years of digging through Chinese history, she had never once stood inside a project this massive that no one, anywhere, had bothered to write down. Radiocarbon and stylistic analysis of the tool marks suggest the caves may date back over 1,700 years, placing their construction somewhere in the Han to Tang dynasty period, though even that estimate remains hotly contested, because there is no definitive method to date carved stone with the same precision as organic material. What troubles researchers most isn't just the missing timeline, it's the missing motive. Every other massive engineering project from ancient China, the Great Wall, the Grand Canal, the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, appears in some historical document, however brief. The Longyou Caves appear in none. It's as if an entire underground metropolis was built, used, and then deliberately erased from memory. So what were the caves actually for? Before you decide for yourself, know this. Over the past 3 decades, some of the sharpest minds in Chinese archaeology have proposed 4 major theories, and one by one, the evidence has quietly ruled out almost all of them. The simplest explanation is that this was nothing more than an industrial rock quarry, and the smooth walls are simply the byproduct of ancient stone extraction. But quarry workers rarely produce this level of geometric precision. The support pillars are carved into perfect proportions, positioned with what modern engineers consider deliberate structural math, not the rough, functional cuts you'd expect from workers just trying to remove stone for building material. Some historians argue the caves may have served as a hidden garrison, capable of sheltering thousands of soldiers and their supplies during a time of war. The layout does resemble a defensible position. Narrow entrances, wide internal chambers, multiple connected levels, but no weapons, no armor, and no military artifacts of any kind have ever been recovered from the site. Given the region's history of elaborate burial architecture, some researchers have proposed the caves were designed as a resting place for nobility, perhaps intended to rival the terracotta warriors in scale. Yet no human remains, no sarcophagi, and no ceremonial objects have ever surfaced during excavation. Some scholars believe the sheer effort taken to conceal the site, including the possibility that the caves were intentionally flooded after completion, suggests whatever happened down there was never meant to be seen again by anyone. Flooding a nearly completed underground complex isn't an accident, it's a decision. And decisions like that are usually made for one reason: to bury something the builders didn't want the surface world to find. Modern engineers who've studied the site have made an even stranger observation. The support pillars throughout the caverns aren't just structurally sound. They follow a consistent geometric ratio, engineered so precisely that some modern architects have called the design shockingly advanced for its presumed era. Whoever planned this space understood load-bearing mathematics well enough to hollow out a structure the size of a cathedral, using hand tools, without a single recorded collapse in over 1,000 years. That level of precision doesn't come from an untrained labor force digging in the dark. It comes from planners, engineers, people who knew exactly what they were building, and, seemingly, people who knew exactly how to make sure no one else would ever find out why. Today, the Longyou Caves are open to tourists, lit with soft lantern light, presented as a curious detour on a countryside trip through Zhejiang Province. But strip away the tour guides and gift shops, and what remains is one of the largest unresolved mysteries in ancient engineering. An underground city, larger than many ancient palaces, built with a precision that still challenges modern architects, and erased so thoroughly from history that not a single document acknowledges it ever existed. Somewhere in those silent stone chambers, chisel marks still run in perfect, unbroken lines, the only signature the builders ever left behind. They didn't write down what they built. They didn't write down why. Wu Anai still lives near the site. He's said more than once that he sometimes wonders what would have happened if he'd simply left that pond alone.
if the water had stayed exactly where it was for another 1,000 years. 30 years after one farmer decided to drain a useless pond, we still don't fully know what they were hiding down there. Or from whom.